the Tarpon Springs League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. And just bear with me. I am Ellen Sigmund, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters North Pinellas and your moderator for tonight. And this is my first full-time moderating solo, so bear with me. The League was created, I'll just give you a little background. A call to order, but before we do anything, I think we should do the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm sorry. So if we all stand and rise, and I think the flag is right there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. So as I said, I am Ellen Sigmund, and I am with the League of Women Voters North Pinellas, and I am your moderator tonight. Just as a little background, the League of Women Voters was founded in 1920, so we are celebrating the 100th year, along with the Amendment 19 to give women the right to vote. But since 1974, the League has been open to both men and women. The League strongly supports the electoral process and encourages voters to educate themselves prior to voting and encourages all others qualified to vote. We are here tonight for the municipal city election of a county, Commissioner Seat 1, right? Is that Commissioner Seat 1? That's correct. Where we have two candidates, Susan Hales and Jacob Carr. The election will be on March 17th, and the date to vote, to register to vote, is February 17th. So make sure, if you are not registered to vote, the supervisor of elections is out here to get registered, or anyone else you know. Also, as a public service announcement, this is a nonpartisan race, but you know we have presidential election primaries coming up, so you can only in Florida register, participate in a primary, vote in the primary if you are of a particular party. So just young people sometimes don't know that, so pass it on to the younger ones as well. Also, the date, if you'd like to vote by mail, March 11th is the last date, so there are little postcards that you can vote by mail, or you can go online as well. So I did all that. The hallmark of democracy is a willingness to treat all with courtesy and respect, not just those we agree with. Tonight's candidates forum rules call for adherence to those terms of civil discourse between the candidates and the public. It is in that spirit that we are here tonight to engage in a vital part of our democracy process, a civilized discourse of important issues confronting our community. So that's the formal introduction. As we said, that the views expressed here by the candidates are the candidates, not the leagues. And we sponsor the forum. We do not endorse any candidates, and all candidates are invited to participate. A few rules. If you do have a cell phone, can you put it on vibrate, silence, turn it off, whatever, so that we don't get interrupted with bells and whistles. Questions will be screened by me. I've done a little in advance, or not, to make sure they're fair and without personal attacks. Sometimes there might be some duplicates, and we will try to condense them as well. The candidates in advance have drawn numbers, but there are only two, and I happen to do it in alpha order. So I will go over the rules. Ms. Hales will go first, give an opening statement for 2 minutes, then Mr. Carr will do an opening statement of 2 minutes. Ms. Hales will get the first question. Each question will be for a minute, and then you will get, we have timers in the front, and they will notify you at minute 30 and 15, And stop. Becky's our famous stop person. So we ask you to adhere by the time limits. And then closing remarks will be for a minute, and we'll do reverse order. Mr. Carr, you will then go first. We have until 8 o'clock. The other question, another announcement I have to make is the chairperson of the Charter Review Committee is here. We will not ask questions about that, but I think they are in the back, or the chairman is right there. You probably all know him. And he will answer questions, and I think they have a fact sheet there, because I noticed on your ballot that you have several revisions up for on the ballot. Without that, I think. Oh, hold a round of applause. Okay, right, till the very end at the closing. So no, yays or nays. And with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Hales if you'd like to make an opening statement for 2 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters in the City of Tarpon Springs for sponsoring this forum. I'm Susan Hales, a 7-year resident of Tarpon Springs. I earned a bachelor's degree in finance at the University of South Alabama in 1985 and began a 25-year career in healthcare finance in Birmingham, Alabama. During that time, my husband and I also owned 2 small businesses. We relocated to Tarpon Springs in 2012, where I continue my career now at the Catholic Diocese as the financial reporting manager. Outside of work, I love to travel and run. I'm recently completing my 25th marathon. I also enjoy being a mother of 2 and a grandmother of 5. As a Tarpon resident, I've completed the Citizens Academy program and currently serve as the vice chair on the Budget Advisory Board. I have volunteered at the Fine Arts Festival and the Rotary Triathlon. Also, I founded a local fitness group that meets in Tarpon Springs. I've chosen to run for commissioner to bring a fresh perspective. I could give you the customary list of goals such as road repair, flood control, and public safety. But those are the basics of city operations and should be the expectation, not the goal. There are ongoing projects that address the basics, but no clearly defined vision for our future. Through citizen engagement and commission collaboration, a clear vision can be defined that would align with an updated comprehensive plan. I want to place Tarpon Springs in a position of leading rather than catching up. My vision is of a city that honors its history while being progressive in its actions to form a safe, solvent, sustainable, and spirited community. This campaign for me is not about an election day win, but rather encouraging you all to play an active role in a journey to a better Tarpon Springs. An engaged community is where the win for all will be realized.
Oh, Mr. Carr.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jacob Carr. I grew up in the historic district of Tarpon Springs along with my 2 sisters, and today my parents still live in the same historic bungalow I grew up in, where they instilled my faith, character, and integrity at a young age. I attended elementary through high school in Tarpon Springs and have always called Tarpon Springs home. My wife moved to Tarpon Springs after we married in 2014, and we have a beautiful 14-month-old baby girl and are expecting our son in early April. At a young age, driving around town with my dad, we would talk about different projects and question why things were completed a certain way. At that time, he said, if I want to make a difference, to get involved. That's when I started paying more attention to the different projects that were happening around Tarpon Springs. While attending college, I was appointed to the Historic Preservation Board of Tarpon Springs, which I served on for 3 years. After serving 3 years in the HPB, I was appointed to the Planning and Zoning Board of Tarpon Springs, which I served on for 4 years, until I was elected as City Commissioner in 2017. While serving the past 3 years as City Commissioner, I have continued to work for a national healthcare company as a procurement manager, which I manage $550 million plus annually in spend, and are responsible for negotiations and operational improvements. When I have a chance on the weekends, I help my parents out with their businesses, which are both based in Tarpon Springs. During my term as commissioner, I have witnessed a lot of great things accomplished without dipping into any reserve funds and seeing the millage tax rate drop, increased communication and relationships with federal, state, county officials, beautification projects, environmental projects, and keeping public safety a top priority. I would like to ask for your continued support and confidence by voting Jacob Carr, City Commissioner, Seat 1, on March 17th.
Thank you. And now we will start with the public questions. Ms. Hale will go first for 1 minute, and then Mr. Carr. Even in your opening statements, you both said why you are running, but what would you do differently, or what would you do the same, or continue to do the same and differently if you are elected to the seat?
Well, since I'm not currently elected, I wouldn't do anything differently. It would be a new thing. But what I've observed is frequently our citizens don't know what's going on in the city. So my first priority is citizen engagement, as I said in my opening statement. Without an engaged community, we're not going to grow and thrive. So my first priority would be to increase our communications through neighborhood newsletters, town hall meetings, and website enhancement.
Thank you. Mr. Carr?
Thank you. As City Commissioner, one of my goals was to reach out to federal, state, and local county officials. And that's one thing I've achieved in doing so. I've met with Senator Scott in person. I've met with Senator Rubio's office in person in D.C. I've met with State House Representative, State Speaker Chris Sprawls multiple times. I've met with State Senator Ed Hooper and also multiple commissioners across that represent Tarpon Springs. So the important thing is that we focus on getting funds from other state, federal, and county avenues for the projects that are going on in Tarpon Springs. That's one thing I would continue to do in Tarpon Springs is fight for funds to come back to Tarpon Springs, because at that point we have more money to spend on other projects throughout Tarpon Springs as well. And from a communication standpoint, I really love how the City of Tarpon Springs communicates today through our Facebook page, through our website, and also with our newsletter. I'm proud to say I was behind the newsletter that came in the water bill now quarterly to update you on all the projects that are going on.
Okay, Mr. Carr. What kind of experience do you bring to the office?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Like I've said, I've been city commissioner for the past 3 years. I've learned a lot over the past 3 years. Coming into it, I thought I knew more than I did, and I definitely learned a lot over the past 3 years. So before that, I was on city boards for 7 years. I was a vice chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board before I was elected as well. So I do bring a lot of experience. I ask a lot of questions before the meetings happen, and I love asking questions during the meeting as well, because what that does to me, it gets information on the record, and it also educates the individuals that are watching online and also in the audience as well. So I feel I'm the most qualified candidate for this position.
Ms. Hales?
What I bring is 30 years of experience in the corporate world, both not-for-profit, and for-profit. I've been in a position where I've had to bring multiple department heads together, physicians together to collaborate. I've had to present financial statements to them and help them to understand where we are positioned. I've served on the advisory board here in Tarpon Springs, so I have an insight into our finances and where the money's being spent. And I've also been a volunteer here in the community, so I'm connected with this community and know the needs out there and willing to listen to other people. Mostly, though, I bring just an ordinary citizen that cares about the community and wants to do good for it and believes that she can make a difference.
Thank you. Okay, back to you, Ms. Hales, for the question. What do you feel are the strengths and weaknesses of our current Board of Commissioners?
Oh, okay. Our current Board of Commissioners, their strength, I believe, is that they do have a deep dedication to this community. And that's mostly because most of them grew up here. And that's wonderful. There's a lot of value in that. What I've seen as the weaknesses, since I've been attending meetings and watching them online, there tends to get mired down in some details, and we're not progressing the city along. It takes a long time for things to happen, and I know part of that's government, but I also know you can get so buried in the details that you forget the vision of moving the city forward. Also, what I see is there may be a lack of diversity there. Our population is growing in Tarpon Springs. We have a lot of newcomers here, and we have more women than men in our population. So I think our board should represent the diversity of that population.
Okay, and Mr. Carr?
I think one of the strengths with our current commission is that the current commission can disagree on multiple items within the meeting and move on and not take it personally for the most part. I think that's important as a commissioner and as a board, is that we can come together, vote yes, and agree on some items, and then we're not going to agree on 100% of all the items. So I think that's nice to have that different point of view across the board. From a weakness standpoint, I think just getting information more timely may be the biggest weakness across the board, to be able to be prepared to answer the questions overall.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Carr, back to you. What will you do to attract and retain younger families?
Well, I fall in that category, which is great. I'm 33 years old, and my wife is also 33 years old, and like I mentioned, we have a 14-month-old daughter and a son on the way. Recreation and just a lively downtown is a positive thing, and investing in our downtown, investing in the events that are going on in our downtown with quality events, investing in our recreation to make sure our recreational fields are up to par. The Little League field saw a $90,000 improvement last fiscal year. We also purchased additional parking for that area as well. Having things for families to do, from playgrounds that are updated to just clean parks, which we're super proud of doing that. One of the things too that I stand behind is I question the county with Fred Howard Park, because there's been a lot of lax maintenance out there. I met the operations manager out there to talk about the areas that need to be improved. So making sure we hold the county accountable is important too.
Okay, and Ms. Hales?
Yes, I feel too that you have to offer recreation for the children to be involved in with Little League, with our Parks and Recreation Department. The summer camps are a huge success, and I would continue that. Also, the events like Snow Place like Tarpon, the First Fridays, places where kids can get out and play in the parks, on the beaches, those all attract it. But beyond that, it's got to be a city where they feel like the whole community is pulled together and wants to work together. Also, I believe that we need to offer more market value housing for young families to come in. I think the apartments that are being built by Winn-Dixie will offer that and give us a better demographic and more diversity in our population.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Hales, I have here a question. Tourism is a huge economic driver to the city. What do you think would be done to increase tourism here in Tarpon Springs?
Well, first of all, we need to tap into the resources already there in our county. There's a Tourism Development Council that we have no representation on. And if we're out of sight, we're out of mind, and we're not tapping into those resources available. And secondly, I think we need to think outside the box. Brochures, flyers, billboards are all one thing, but we've got to tap into different resources, such as ecotourism. There's a huge rise of that, and we are a prime area to attract that new tourism program. Also, schools could be contacted for field trips, because once a child comes here and tells their parents about Tarpon Springs and how great it is, they'll want to bring their parents back and their other family members and friends. And lastly, we need to tap into our neighbor, Innisbrook, because they have conferences there all the time. They have the huge golf tournament every year. We have a built-in audience that we can market to and offer sort of like cruise-like excursions, day excursions to Tarpon Springs with shuttles back and forth. And they'll come back and be repeat customers.
Mr. Carr.
Thank you. Something to be aware of is that Tarpon has over 1 million visitors currently visiting a year, which is an important number. We have a thriving tourism industry, and obviously the Anklet River has a huge impact on that. The Anklet River has an indirect impact of about $250 million a year on Pinellas County and northern Pinellas County and Tarpon Springs. Tarpon Springs also produces $400,000 a year in tax revenue for hotel taxes. That a dime of that does not come back to Tarpon Springs. So that needs to be fought for, that needs to be requested for projects, it needs to be asked about where are we following up. We need to hold our city manager accountable to making sure that Tarpon Springs is getting the money due that is being paid to the county and being used in other cities throughout the county. Tarpon Springs should not be supplementing larger cities throughout the county like St. Petersburg and Clearwater any longer. Overall, I think the commission actually puts together a decent amount of money for tourism and marketing today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to you, Mr. Carr. About improving public transportation. Do you support public transit and working with the county to obtain more North County transit?
The answer is yes, I do support public transit. I do travel to Clearwater every day down 19, and it's a mess. One of the things that I'll continue to harp on is that also the city of Tarpon Springs pays about $1.3 million a year in taxes to the PSTA, which is really frustrating because the PSTA really has ignored Tarpon Springs as a whole. Now, the mayor did a great job working with the Healthy Hop and helping out the elderly individuals throughout Tarpon Springs to get from doctor's appointments to the hospital, from their homes if they can't afford a ride or they don't have a reliable source. So that's a great partnership that we've seen with Advent Health, North Pinellas, PSTA, and Tarpon Springs. But there's got to be areas that we get creative because public transportation isn't working in this area like it should. I also think the Jolly Trolley is something that they take advantage of the public sector and the public municipalities because they charge us way too much for the contracts. So that's one thing we have to continue to hold them accountable to as well.
Ms. Hales?
I too think we need to tap into the PSTA more. We don't need to try to reinvent the wheel. There's agencies out there that are looking at transit every day and coming up with solutions, possibly solutions. We need to have a voice in those organizations and be involved with them. Traffic in this area is going to be a problem because we're a commuter city, we're a commuter region, and we need to look at different modes of transportation. We should be a walkable community, a bikeable community, and currently we don't really have the infrastructure or the paths for our citizens to get out there and choose a different mode of transportation. I am encouraged by the Healthy Hop as well. That's helping our seniors get to where they need to be. But we also need to look at different modes such as ride sharing and biking.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Ms. Hale, next question. Where do you see the city in 5 years? Are you for developing or making areas pretty? That goes along with community redevelopment areas. Do you have a plan for the city 5 years from now?
Yes, I am for development. We need to grow our tax base, first of all, and we do need more market value housing for people that aren't looking for a single family home. We need more apartments. I had a friend recently that wanted to move to Tarpon Springs. She couldn't find any apartments here. So we need to add that more type of housing for that better demographic of young professionals that will result in a thriving community. And beautification, of course. We want our city to be beautiful, and that will, again, attract more people. So my vision is, like I say, we need an engaged community that's going to move us forward, welcome new people in, and just see changes happening.
Mr. Carr?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Where do you see the city in 5 years? What are your plans for development or making the areas prettier? As for where is community redevelopment area, where do you see development going in that 5-year plan?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in 5 years, I expect to see Tarpon to be even more robust than it is today. The community redevelopment area runs from Mears to Live Oak along alternate 19, a couple blocks east towards the bike trail. So where do I see the redevelopment? There's plenty of opportunities. The old Winn-Dixie is an area for redevelopment. There's plenty of areas throughout off the bike trail with open lots, large open lots as well, that are just set for redevelopment as well. But it's important that we offer these grants to developers and really push our economic development team to go out and meet with developers outside of Tarpon Springs and bring in developers to show them what Tarpon Springs is about. Because we've got a great community here, we've got a great residents, we have a great restaurant base, we have a great visitors, and it's just important to keep that positive growth going. So one of the things I would do as commissioner is continue to push the grants to continue development in this area.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Carr, do you please detail your plans for accomplishing the dredge? Is there?
Yeah, I can do that. So the dredge, was currently tasked with, the dredge funds were awarded by the federal government through the Army Corps of Engineers, which is a great achievement for Tarpon Springs. As I mentioned, it's about $250 million a year impact in the economy of North Pinellas. When I was up in D.C., I had the opportunity to meet with Marco Rubio's office and meet with Senator Scott directly to ask for some dredge help for future years. Also would send letters, and the city staff worked with the other commissioners to send letters to the state asking the governor for funds. I had a personal meeting with Chris Sprouls as well, and Senator Ed Hooper to talk about the additional turnaround basin that's needed that wasn't funded part of the federal funding. And that's about $900,000, which is currently in the city's budget. But if the city receives funding from the state, that's $900,000 we're able to put back into the city's budget to use on projects that are needed throughout Tarpon Springs. So I think we're doing a great job with the dredging so far, and there's a little bit more to do.
And Ms. Hale?
I know this was a project that was worked on for a long time by a lot of people, and we're very excited that that's going to happen. Of course, if I'm elected commissioner, I would continue to pursue those relationships as well to see that this does happen, because I know at one time the funds were appropriated and then they got pulled back when the hurricane happened in the Panhandle. So just because we think it's a done deal now doesn't mean it's a done deal until it starts happening and we see the progress being made. So you do need to stay on top of it.
Thank you. Okay, and Ms. Hale, back to you. The Board of Commissioners, on a vote of 4-1, disregarded the advice of their Budget Advisory Committee on lowering the millage rate. How do you feel about this, and what were the consequences?
Well, our advisory boards give of their time and talent, and they do their research, and they make an informed decision to advise the Board of Commissioners. In this particular case, the millage rate was lowered by 0.05. Now, we as an advisory board looked at that, and I did the calculation on mine personally, and by lowering that rate, I saved $5 that year, this past year, paying my property taxes. What the city had to do was cut $90,000 out of their budget and cut city services. So for my $5 savings, I lost $90,000 in city services. So what that tells me is our advisory boards do their due diligence, they make an informed decision and make a recommendation, and while the Board of Commissioners may value their time, they don't go along mostly with decisions that have been made.
Thank you. And Mr. Carr?
Yeah, I was one of the votes that supported the tax decrease for the millage rate, and I stand behind that every time I have the opportunity. One thing that you want to be aware of is that the revenues have increased in the city tremendously over the past couple of years with tax values, with the tax values of the homes increasing as well. Did I find it as an opportunity to give some money back to the residents? I absolutely thought that was appropriate and the time to do it. Do I value the Budget Advisory Board and their opinion and the amount of work they put into it? 100%. We asked for advisory, that they're there to advise, the boards are there to advise the City Commission. Yes, the opinions are valued, but doesn't mean that's what the City Commission has to go after because it's an advisory board. But at the end of the day, we need to have lower taxes in Tarpon Springs at the end of the day. We need to have lower water rates for our residents as well. There's some opportunities there to discuss that further.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Carr, back to you. Citizens have noticed the lack of visibility of law enforcement. What would you do to address the concerns about law enforcement?
Okay, I'm not aware of that. I'm obviously a sitting city commissioner, and please reach out to me anytime you have any issues with law enforcement. I'm happy to talk to the city manager about that. At the end of the day, we have law enforcement that patrol our towns, or patrol our city. We have them on foot, patrolling certain neighborhoods. We have them on bicycles, patrolling certain neighborhoods. They're at a lot of our events. They have a coffee. One of the great things that Tarpon Springs does is they have coffee with a cop, where you can meet them at Dunkin' Donuts, ask any question that you'd like. Anything that comes up, they're happy to answer it with you. Our police chief is an open book. There's really nothing that's held back from the police department as a whole that I've witnessed. And I've challenged them with a lot of different questions from overtime and some other aspects. But I stand fully behind the Tarpon Springs Police Department.
And Ms. Hale?
Yes, first, let me say that Tarpon Springs has an accredited police department, and they're continually providing continuing education for their officers. And they're very involved in the schools and with our kids through the SRO program and the Cops and Kids program. And also, their response time is 3 minutes, which is incredible. Now, that said, we've been increasing our number of police vehicles. We're up to about 80 now, I believe. So, in my mind, as a citizen, I should see more patrol cars going around, and that would give me that added sense of security that somebody's there at a moment's notice. Also, I like the idea of more foot patrols, engaging with our businesses and getting a one-on-one relationship going as well. And we do have the Pinellas Trail going right through our city, so more bike patrols would be nice to see as well, running from maybe Mears to the sponge docks and around the bayous.
Thank you. Back to you, Ms. Hales. What are your thoughts on the $1,200 sale of city land to a private owner being added onto the March ballot for a referendum, yet the purchase of the old Sun Bay Motel for almost $1 million was not?
Yes, recently the board did vote on the sale of a parcel valued at $1,200. The vote did not pass. They could not reach a consensus, and from my watching the video, it seemed to be because there was a lack of clear information. So since they couldn't reach consensus, they decided to kick it to referendum, and there was even a couple of comments in that meeting that was ridiculous. How could the voters decide? And I completely agree. They didn't have enough information that they could come to a consensus, so how are the voters going to do that without the education? But yet, conversely, 2 years ago with the Sun Bay, they could not send that to referendum when they should have, because any purchase over $250,000 would require a referendum. So they circumvented the system and sent it to the CRA to purchase, and that purchase ended up borrowing funds from a water and sewer fund that still continue to be paid back. And that Sun Bay property also sits vacant still. So it just seems like there's a use of the system to the advantage.
And Mr. Carr, same question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The $1,200 appraisal was appraised for the property. There's a commissioner on the board that wasn't willing to stand up and make a decision. There plenty of information. The question was asked by the commissioner to bring additional information back. It was brought back. It's an embarrassment to the city. This commissioner should be embarrassed about that. So with that, it's a no-brainer that this is a surplus piece of property. It was appraised for $1,200. It should have been approved on by the commission. Talking about the Sun Bay, it's a very passionate area that I have been part of, and that's part of the CRA. It's a different board, it's a different budget. It's called the Community Redevelopment Area. And the goal of the Community Redevelopment Area is actually to remove blighted properties and encourage growth. I think if you ask anybody here tonight, the Sun Bay was a blighted property and was a nuisance in the town for many, many years. So the way the charter reads is if it's general funds and the city dollars, it would go to referendum if it's over $250,000. But since it's a community redevelopment area, which is appointed by the state and is a separate board, it doesn't have to go to referendum. So there's no question there. So there's no passing around anything to get around any sidestepping.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Carr, back to you. What are your plans for providing more middle-class housing inventory? For providing, is the city providing any more development for middle-class housing?
Okay. Thank you for your question. From the standpoint is Tarpon Springs is built out entirely. There's a couple areas on the outside of town that hasn't been built on yet, but there's really no more room to build. So I don't really have any other answers on that one. I grew up in Tarpon Springs. My parents were in the middle class. I would consider myself a middle class. I think there's plenty of middle class houses to be purchased in Tarpon Springs or to rent. So I don't really see a larger demand for it. I'm encouraged to see more apartments being built off Ultra 19 right now to attract some younger blood into Tarpon Springs overall. And I'm really encouraged to see the areas that are being redeveloped in the historic area as well. You're seeing a lot of the older houses that are being flipped and really being restored back to their beauty from when they were first built.
And Ms. Hales?
Yes, I don't agree that we're out of room to build, particularly with the new middle class and the younger professionals. They're looking for smaller homes. They're the tiny homes, as you say, as you see. But so I think we still have room to grow. The apartments, as I've stated earlier, I think are a great asset to Tarpon Springs. It's going to bring young professionals in. And I also think the use of mixed-use development where you have residential on top and retail on bottom is also a way that we can grow.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hales, would you advocate and support the city moving forward to get the Florida Communities Trust grant to purchase the Walmart property to be turned into a park? As far as ecotourism, and what are your thoughts on the environmental versus the financial needs of a city?
Well, environmental needs are very important given the sea level rise and now the focus on sustainability. So we do have to keep that in mind. We also want to increase our tax base, so it's a balance, but doesn't mean the two can't go together. When we have development, you can make requirements where they keep green space and are mindful of the ecology. As far as the Walmart site, you know, there's a lot of pipe dreams with that, and of course, I mean, if we can keep it as a park or an ecotourism area, or even partner with some of our local universities to make it an ecology park of sorts, that would be great. But, you know, all the parties got to be involved, and we've got to get the money, or Walmart's got to be willing to sell.
Thank you. And Mr. Carr?
Thank you. I asked the city manager to look into this some months back. So I'm for looking into getting funds from the state of Florida for any park preservation. The property is currently under contract, so that's one issue that we have to look at today. So it's under contract currently, and it's being, due diligence period is currently being in process by a developer to build on this property. So right now, the city couldn't come in and ask to make an offer on this property, is my understanding. But I would support utilizing the trust funds from the state for any opportunity we can to make additional parks throughout Tarpon Springs.
Thank you. Okay, getting back to more funds and money. Mr. Carr, what are the total funds in the general fund, I guess in Tarpon, and how much are in reserves? Do you feel that the reserves are sufficient?
Thank you. Yeah, the general fund for 2020 is $26 million. The total budget is $63.9 million, and the total funds in the reserve right now are about 8.8. City ordinance requires that at least 20% be held in the reserve funds, which currently today is about 36%, I believe it is, in the reserve fund. So with having $8.8 million sitting in cash, not being deployed for any bricks and mortar projects throughout Tarpon Springs, repaving or anything along those lines, I think 8.8 is enough amount of money to have in reserve funds. Like I said, it's well above the 20%, which is in the 30+% that we're required to keep. And I think it's important to use the tax dollars that come in to invest back into the city today for better roads, better water systems, to bring water to the houses and public safety.
And Ms. Hales, want to comment on the general funds versus?
Right. The general fund balance right now is actually $15 million. The $26 million is actually the annual budgeted revenues and expenditures, but our fund balance sits at $15 million. Of which $8.8 million is in the unassigned fund. Fortunately, we've not had to use that in the past few years. There have been times that we've had to dip in that. And yes, while we are within the net asset policy of keeping the 20% balance, which would be $5 million, and we're well above that, I prefer to maintain that level and even grow that level a little bit more. We're having a robust economy right now, so we need to set aside funds while we can. We know we're going to have a cyclical downturn at some point, and we need to be prepared for that. Not only that, we also are in the face of a hurricane season at any point or any other type of threat. We all want to sleep at night knowing the city's going to have enough money there to continue city operations.
Thank you. Ms. Hales, back to you. The Shepherd Center is expanding and will attract more homeless persons in need. Are you in favor of this, and what is your opinion regarding the expansion, how to deal with it?
Well, I don't oppose the expansion of the Shepherd Center because people need help. And if they're wanting to expand and help people, then that's a good thing. Homelessness has been a problem for years, and across the nation is becoming more of a problem. You know, we have representation on the homeless board in Pinellas County, and we need to tap into those resources and how to deal with it. And going back to law enforcement, we need to have those foot patrols out there. There's going to be your chronic homeless that don't want help, and we need to address those through law enforcement. But there's also people that truly need the help, and that needs to be available to them.
Right, thank you. Mr. Carr.
Thank you. The Shepherd Center has done a lot of great things in the past, and I'm encouraged to see the new additional offerings that they have for the families that are in need. But one thing that we don't want to be as Tarpon Springs is an attractor to chronic nuisances. And we don't want to be an attractor to chronic nuisances from other cities in the area as well. So with meeting with our police department, I know we have a couple officers that are dedicated to, that are responsible for the chronic nuisance control and making sure they know who's in our city, who they are. I also think it's important that we hold the Shepherd Center accountable to who they're feeding that are coming into our town. One thing, if you have a registered person that's coming in for food, I think it's important to be able to know who's here. Do I want to be able to help out everybody we can? Absolutely. If a family's in need, we need to be able to give them a hot soup, we need to be able to give them a hot meal, and a safe place to stay. But we also want to be able to protect the residents here that live in Tarpon Springs and call home, and the kids that walk our streets.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Carr, if you'll have to help me out there if I'm pronouncing this right. As there, I don't know, is this the Merds Mango Construction? Is that the name of it?
Mears,
Is,
yep.
Mears, about to get started and soon afterwards would be completed. Would you advocate this for the city to move forward in opening up distant avenues so that it allows better access to SPC?
Thank you. I was at the groundbreaking for Mears. That's going to connect Ultra 19 to US 19 last week. It was a great accomplishment for the city to see this move forward. It's been a long time coming, for about 10 plus years, and it's great to see. There's a lot of issues around Tarpon Springs, and traffic would be one of them. Evaluating our traffic routes, as you know, we could sit on Ultra 19 for quite some time. If 19 shut down because of a fatal accident, you're going to have Ultra 19 backed up, and it's going to be about an hour and a half just to get from Palm Harbor to Tarpon Springs and downtown. And then you've got, which is nice with the Mears crossing area, though, it's going to bring a lot more flow from US 19 to Ultra 19, so hopefully it'll help alleviate that traffic, but there's still more opportunities to do better. And I think it's time to research some ideas and really look into the next avenue and what that could look like.
And Ms. Hales?
Yes, I am very excited about the Mears extension. I live over off Florida, so I'm excited about having another access route to US 19 and also an evacuation route for us. And with that apartment complex, I think that would alleviate some of the traffic on Alt 19. But I think the question really spoke more to the distant avenue cut through. That's come up before in the past. It runs right through a neighborhood, so that neighborhood certainly would need to be consulted. They've opposed it in the past, and I suspect they would too this time. But again, through citizen engagement, mostly people just fear the unknown. If you go out and meet with them and explain to them what's going on, I think they will appreciate it better and understand the need for it. I've spoken to the fire department, and for them, I know the distant cut-through would greatly reduce their response time there.
Okay, thank you. Well, this was a statement. The Sunshine Law, would you follow it, and do you agree with it? Well, in Florida, you have to follow it. So all public hearings are open. So, okay, but that goes to another issue. Your thoughts on improving civic participation and engagement. What are your thoughts use of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, I don't know, all the other avenues that people use to communicate and to get more civic participation?
Is that for me first?
Yes, if you could go first.
Well, I think
and
you
just
could all
your thoughts
agree.
on it, or what do you feel about it, how
Well,
the city can better use it, maybe.
Right. Well, I think you can all agree my recurring theme tonight is citizen engagement, so that is my top priority. And yes, I've read recent articles that say most of the people get their news, if you can call it that, 65% of it get their news from social media. So I am a great proponent of using that as a better avenue for communicating with citizens. Now, that said, I do realize there's an older population that they don't care anything about social media, so we still have to reach them too. But I also think that you just go back to the old-fashioned days of that town hall meeting. I know we have Board of Commissioner meetings and the public is allowed to speak, but how intimidating is that to get up here at the podium and talk? If you're in a town hall forum, you feel like you're all there for the same thing, you're going to be more willing to get up and share your ideas.
And Mr. Carr, can you comment on the use of social media?
Sure, thank you. Just for clarity too, I totally support the Sunshine Law being followed. It's something I take with great respect, and I follow the Sunshine Law with all meetings and all communications with everybody. It's important no matter what boards we're on that we follow the Sunshine Laws, because it's put in place that we have to follow a certain way and that the public has the right to hear what's being discussed upon in a public meeting. Secondly, in the second part of the question, talked about social media. I'm an advocate for social media. I'm on it every day, just as probably the rest of you are as well. It's a great resource. The city does a great job today marketing the projects that are going on in the city and getting them out there. So I'm encouraged by that, and I would continue to encourage the city to do that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carr, how do you view the role of the Board of Commissioner? Do you see it as an approver of what's placed before the commission, or do you see it as a vision to guide the city more as towards something, a greater vision? And, you know, the actual role of the board.
Okay, so the question is vision
versus the...
yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I support the vision side of things. First off, the budget is a very important part of the City Commission's role, but then the vision of the City of Tarpon Springs is also very important. And it's good to know, and it's good to, you have to communicate as a commissioner appropriately and clearly to the city manager to understand, so he understands your vision as a commissioner to what you expect to see in the City of Tarpon Springs. So from my perspective, I sit up here and from my communications with the residents, I then develop my vision for the Tarpon Springs as a whole, and that's how I communicate back to the city manager, and that's how I vote when I come to the commission meetings to represent the residents overall. So I think it's very important to have a clear vision, a vision for growth, a vision for beautification, a vision for a great place to retire, play, and live.
Thank you. And Ms. Hales?
Again, a recurring theme of mine tonight has been a vision for the city. So yes, I do see that the board needs to have that vision. The board's responsibility is to work for the citizens, and in doing so, they would direct the city manager. But that doesn't mean that they would do the city manager's job or the job of the staff. Their job is just to look at what the staff presents and evaluate and back and forth. So mainly, I think the board is there to listen to the citizens and bring that forth to the city and guide the direction of the city. Also, this board is tasked with the care of the Anclote River, and I'm encouraged to see that there's a charter amendment out there that's going to actually enumerate the board's responsibilities, and that would include evaluation of the city manager in the future, because how does he know how he's doing unless he's formally evaluated by the board?
Thank you. Ms. Hale, back to you. Do you have a plan or any thoughts on how the city can work more effectively with the county?
By being present at meetings, mostly. We can't isolate ourselves up here in North County. Sometimes we're thought of, I think, as the redheaded stepchild. So the county has numerous boards, and we've got to pursue more active roles in that. And just the good old-fashioned pick up the phone and call. You know, even if I come on the commission and I don't have these relationships, I'm not opposed to picking up the phone and calling whoever needs to be called. The trick is just to reach out to the person that can get the job done.
Thank you. And Mr. Carr?
Thank you. Yeah, I find it super important to communicate to the county. That's one of the things that I promised in my first election, and it's one thing I could stand on to say I absolutely completed. If it's reaching out to the county commissioners, if it's reaching out to county staff, if it's reaching out to the Pinellas County School Board, and whatever aspect that may be. I'm excited to say that we've helped expand the scope of the Riverside Beckett Bridge at the Yacht Club, where it includes a drainage project that will help with the drainage on Riverside that is around Chesapeake area, and also expand the scope to hopefully include a south side sidewalk that wasn't initially included. So through those communications with the county is an important part. Also, funding from the county is important too. The City of Tarpon Springs pays over $9 million a year in tax ad valorem to the county, and we need to make sure that they understand that we're expecting projects up here regularly. And that's one thing that I'm excited about. I met with the county chairman of the board over the summer and explained our needs for different projects.
Thank you. I have just 2 more questions. If there's any other questions from the audience, you can raise your hand and someone will pick them up. Mr. Carr, what do you think is the most important single issue facing Tarpon Springs, and what is your plan to do for that issue?
Let's see. Today, Tarpon Springs is a pretty unique community with the amount of bayous and rivers, property frontage that they have. A rising tide is going to be a serious issue as this continues. I currently live across the street from the water, and I've seen over the past 7 years of living there, the tides rise. We have water that completely goes across our road into our driveway to where you can't leave the house in a car. The nice thing is I do drive a larger vehicle where I can go through it if I need to get out. But the other tough part is the majority of our houses were built in the subpar area that are below the buildable thresholds today by the building codes. So working with our recently inaugurated sustainability board and looking at different projects throughout the city where we can address flooding, we can address some other aspects of environmental impacts is going to be one of the more important things over the next few years that we have to look at.
Thank you. And Ms. Hales?
Our biggest challenge right now is that we have no real comprehensive plan for the city to move forward. We've kind of just been happy with the status quo, and we'll do a project here, do a project there, but we really have no cohesive plan of where we're headed with that. Again, the sustainability is a huge issue with the sea level rise. $69 billion in property in Florida is in jeopardy by year 2030. That's 10 years from now. So we have a short time frame and a lot of work to do.
Thank you. And this is my last question before closing, unless we have any additional questions from the audience. If there's one thing that you would like to accomplish if you get elected for the term of, I guess, 3 years, what would it be, Ms. Hales?
Well, again, I'm going to echo everything I've said tonight about citizen engagement. I see the same people cycling on and off the board. I see the same people sitting in this audience. We've got to get out and reach more people. We're not just the historic district. We're not just the sponge docks. We are a city of 25,000 people. Then we have 2,500 maybe that really get involved in one aspect or another. And this is never going to work. We're never going to move forward until we get everybody engaged. While I've been pursuing this office, I've talked to people and I say, hey, I'm running for city commissioner. What's a city commissioner? There's something fundamentally wrong with that. There's something fundamentally wrong if they don't know who my opponent is. So we've got to get the citizens more involved or we're not going to move forward.
Thank you. And Mr. Carr?
I don't have one thing, but it's going to be important that we continue our communication with the state, federal, and county levels for funding. That's going to be one of the most important things during this election, I think, to focus on, is that we have so many tax dollars that leave Tarpon Springs that we must see those tax dollars come back in Tarpon Springs and reinvest into Tarpon Springs. It's owed to our residents, and we owe it to our community as a whole. But overall, increase for safety for pedestrians and bicyclists and motorists. We don't have any bike lanes around any of the bayous. We don't have any bike lanes on the county roads, which I've asked for and lobbied for our county commission now for a couple years. We got to stay active with that by improving recreation for our area, preserving the historic charm. We have issues in parking in downtown where we need a parking garage badly, addressing the flooding issues, continuing the sidewalk and road resurfacing and improvement, supporting our public safety in the fire department and police department, and also continuing our water line replacements. Our RO plant has received multiple state awards saying they're the best in the state, but we need to make sure we're updating our infrastructure too.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions. I don't know if there are any more questions. If not, we'll give you each, since you've just been going back and forth with each other, if you want to take a breath or so. We'll start with closing arguments. Closing statements. I'm a lawyer by training. Closing statements, and we would start with Mr. Carr, but if you want to take a sip of water or anything, unless there's any other questions, I know this is a public forum, so I want to make sure that we answered everyone's questions. And I know I thanked you both because there's only 2 candidates and you've been going back and forth. So I'm just stalling to give you a few minutes to catch your breath.
Can you tell us a joke?
What?
Tell us a joke.
I don't really tell jokes that well. I tell funny stories. Any other questions? So, okay. Mr. Carr, so whenever you're ready, you have a minute to do a closing statement. I think we've covered a lot, but go ahead and give you one last spiel.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your attention tonight and support for my first term as City Commissioner. I ask for your continued support for the opportunity to serve a second term representing all the residents of Tarpon Springs. Growing up in Tarpon Springs, I have had the privilege to see a lot of great changes and will continue to push for nothing but the best for the residents. I look forward to seeing you all throughout the city, answering any concerns you may have. As I mentioned in the opening, I grew up in Tarpon Springs and I have so many great memories here, from beach days, playing around the bayous, to boat trips down the river, and playing Little League baseball. What makes these memories so great are the people that are part of them. The residents are what make Tarpon Springs such a great town to live in as well. I would like to ask for your continued support and confidence by voting Jacob Carr for City Commissioner, Seat 1 on March 17th. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Hale?
Thank you all for attending tonight's forum to show your interest in your community and desire to make it better. In addition to the vote for commissioner, there are city charter amendments on the ballot that I encourage you to read and vote on. Our charter defines how your city will be governed. Those amendments can be found on the city website as well as at votepinellas.com. Tarpon Springs is a beautiful historic city that is at a crossroads of staying in the past or moving forward. In short, we are doing okay, but as the popular ad says, just okay is not okay. We should absolutely continue to honor our past, but that does not mean we must live in it. Our focus now must be on progressing to a sustainable Tarpon Springs, one in which the quality of life is continually enhanced through a strategic vision established through an engaged citizen community. This is your city. The commission works for the citizens. It is your voice that needs to be heard. As commissioner, I will be that voice for you.
Thank you both. Thank you to Ms. Hales and Mr. Carr. And now we can give a round of applause. So, here's my joke, a round of applause. At this point, I'd like to thank both our candidates. I'd like to thank the city for inviting the League of Women Voters, Irene Jacobs, and the mayor. At this point, if there's anything else, any other information, I'm sure the candidates will be here schmoozing. And remember to go and vote. And tell all your young people to go and vote. Thank you very much.